The city bus was a quiet sanctuary for tired passengers until four aggressive men stepped aboard. Chaos immediately filled the narrow space as they intimidated innocent people for cash. At the very back sat Spencer, a quiet stranger with a large, disciplined German shepherd resting at his feet. He only wanted a peaceful ride. But when the arrogant gang leader targeted him and forcefully kicked his loyal dog, the atmosphere instantly froze. The thugs smiled, thinking they had found an easy victim. They had absolutely no idea they had just cornered an active-duty Navy SEAL, and their brief reign of terror was about to end abruptly. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments which country you are watching from, and if you love stories that melt your heart, please subscribe to support our channel. The cold wind of Chicago bit into Spencer's jacket as he walked down the bustling pavement. He moved with an even, measured pace. Sarge walked right beside his left leg. Sarge was a large German shepherd with a thick coat of black and tan fur. Spencer was an active-duty Navy SEAL, currently enjoying a rare 2-week leave. He wanted nothing but quiet. He had spent the morning walking through the open spaces of the city parks, letting the crisp air clear his mind. He wore simple jeans, a dark gray sweater, and comfortable boots. He blended perfectly into the civilian crowd. People often assume that peace is the natural state of the world, but those who have seen the darkest corners of humanity know that peace is merely a fragile pause between conflicts. Spencer understood this better than anyone. He appreciated the silence of the city streets. He appreciated the simple act of buying a coffee without looking over his shoulder. The sun began to dip below the towering skyscrapers. Shadows stretched long over the concrete sidewalks. Spencer decided it was time to head back to their hotel. They reached the bus stop just as a large city bus arrived with a heavy screech of its brakes. The doors folded open. Spencer paid the fare and guided Sarge to the back. The bus was crowded with tired workers, students carrying heavy bags, and people eager to get home. They found a spot near the rear doors. Spencer sat down. Sarge immediately sat on the floor, leaning his warm body against Spencer's boots. The dog did not bark. He simply observed the surroundings with sharp, intelligent eyes. The bus rolled through the neon-lit streets. The engine hummed a steady rhythm. The passengers sat in silence. A mother rocked her sleeping baby. An old man read a folded newspaper. A teenager stared out the window with white headphones over his ears. For 3 stops, the ride remained entirely peaceful. Then, the atmosphere shifted. At the 4th stop, 4 men boarded the bus. They brought a sudden wave of chaos into the quiet space. They wore heavy leather jackets and ripped jeans. Tattoos covered their necks and knuckles. The leader was a tall man with a shaved head and a jagged scar across his chin. He laughed loudly, and his rough voice overpowered the quiet hum of the bus engine. The other 3 men followed closely behind him. They shoved past the teenager with the headphones. The teenager dropped his backpack. The men did not apologize. One of them intentionally stepped on the fallen bag and kicked it aside. The leader spotted the old man reading the newspaper near the window. He grabbed the top of the newspaper and yanked it away, ripping the pages. "Empty your pockets, old-timer," the leader said. The old man trembled. He looked around for help, but the other passengers looked away. He pulled out a crumpled $10 bill and handed it over. The leader snatched the money. His friends laughed and cheered. They moved further down the aisle. They bumped into a young woman. One of the gang members grabbed her arm. She pulled away quickly and kept her eyes glued to the floor. Fear filled the confined space of the bus. The passengers froze in their seats. Nobody spoke a word. Nobody dared to intervene. Spencer watched the entire scene from the back of the bus. His face remained completely still. His heart rate did not increase. Instead, his mind shifted into a familiar gear. He began to analyze their movements. He noted their balance, their line of sight, and their clothing. He looked for hidden weapons. None of them carried firearms. He saw only the shiny clip of a pocket knife attached to the leader's right pocket. Spencer decided to stay seated. He did not want to ruin his hard-earned vacation. He just wanted to return to his hotel room and rest. He hoped the gang would take their few dollars and leave at the next stop. However, the leader's eyes locked onto Spencer sitting in the very back. The tall man smirked and nudged his friend. They walked down the narrow aisle, pushing past the terrified passengers until they stood right in front of Spencer. They formed a tight half-circle around his seat. "Look at this guy," the leader said, "bringing a stupid dog on our bus." Spencer did not reply. He kept his hands resting relaxed on his knees. He looked straight ahead, ignoring the provocation. "Are you deaf?" the leader asked, stepping closer. "I am talking to you. Leave us alone," Spencer said. His voice was incredibly calm. It carried a low, steady pitch that held no trace of fear. "Or what?" the leader asked. He leaned down, placing his hands on his knees to mock Spencer's sitting position. "You think you are tough? You are just a loser with a mutt." Sarge let out a low, rumbling growl. The sound vibrated deep in his chest. The German shepherd sensed the immediate threat to his master. Spencer placed a gentle hand on Sarge's head. The dog went quiet instantly. He obeyed his master without hesitation, though his eyes remained locked on the gang leader's throat. The leader noticed the dog's strict obedience. It angered him. He wanted a reaction. He wanted the man to cower and beg like the old man had done. He saw absolutely no fear in Spencer's eyes, only a cold, calculating emptiness. That emptiness felt like an insult to the gang leader's authority. "I am going to teach you a lesson about respect," the leader said, his voice rising in anger. "And I will start with your ugly dog." The leader shifted his weight. He pulled his right leg back, aiming a heavy, steel-toed boot directly at Sarge's ribs. Spencer's eyes changed. The quiet civilian disappeared. The active-duty Navy SEAL took over. The fragile pause between conflicts had officially ended. The heavy boot swung toward Sarge. Spencer moved faster than the eye could follow. He did not shout. He did not hesitate. The space inside the bus was tight, but Spencer knew exactly how to navigate it. He reached out with his right hand and caught the gang leader's ankle in midair. The leader's mocking smile vanished instantly. Complete confusion replaced it. The tall man tried to pull his leg back, but Spencer's grip was like iron. Spencer twisted the ankle sharply to the right while sweeping his own leg forward. The gang leader lost his balance entirely. He crashed hard onto the ribbed rubber floor of the bus. The loud sound of his body hitting the floor echoed through the quiet space. He gasped heavily for air as the impact knocked the wind out of his lungs. He grabbed his chest, unable to speak or move. The three remaining gang members froze. They stared at their leader writhing on the floor. It took them a full second to process what had just happened. Then anger overtook their shock. The closest man lunged forward. He threw a wild, heavy punch aimed directly at Spencer's head. Spencer did not step back. He deflected the strike effortlessly with his left forearm. He stepped inside the man's guard, closing the distance instantly. He delivered a precise, controlled strike to the attacker's solar plexus. The man folded instantly. He dropped to his knees, clutching his stomach and gasping for breath. The other two men decided to attack at the exact same time. The narrow aisle worked to Spencer's absolute advantage. They could not surround him. They had to come at him in a straight line. Spencer grabbed the wrist of the man on his left. He pulled the man forward, using the attacker's own momentum against him. He pushed the man forcefully into the fourth attacker. Both men stumbled and tumbled backwards into an empty row of seats. They scrambled aggressively to get back up. Spencer did not give them the chance to recover. He closed the distance in 2 quick steps. He used open palm strikes to disorient them. He delivered one solid strike to the first man's chest, pushing him back down into the seat. He delivered another strike to the second man's shoulder, numbing his arm completely. Spencer did not use lethal force. He used exactly enough power to neutralize the threat without causing any permanent damage. Within 10 seconds, all 4 gang members were completely incapacitated. They groaned loudly on the floor and over the seats, completely unable to continue the fight. Sometimes, true power is not shown by how loud someone yells, but by the utter silence they command in the aftermath of chaos. The bus fell into complete stillness once again. The only sound in the vehicle was the heavy, painful breathing of the defeated men. Spencer stood tall in the narrow aisle. He slowly adjusted his dark gray sweater. His breathing remained perfectly steady. His heart rate had barely elevated. Sarge remained exactly where Spencer had told him to stay. The loyal German shepherd did not break his sitting position. He kept his sharp eyes locked on the men on the floor. Whenever one of the attackers tried to shift their weight or reach toward their pockets, Sarge let out a deep, warning growl. The low rumble vibrated through the floorboards. The sound alone was enough to make the gang members freeze in absolute fear. The dog proved to be just as disciplined and focused as his master. Sarge knew his job was to secure the perimeter while Spencer handled the direct threats. The passengers watched the entire event in absolute awe. The thick terror that previously filled the bus completely evaporated. The old man, who had been robbed earlier, slowly reached down. He picked up his crumpled $10 bill from the floor where the gang leader had dropped it. He looked at Spencer with wide, grateful eyes. A teenager sitting near the window held up his smartphone. He was a young boy with curly dark hair and a loose gray sweater. His hands shook slightly, but he kept the camera focused. The red recording light on his screen blinked steadily. He had captured the entire sequence of events from the moment the gang leader demanded money to the final defensive strike. He captured the efficiency, the speed, and the remarkable control Spencer displayed. The bus driver had noticed the commotion in his rearview mirror. He had immediately pressed the silent emergency button located under his dashboard. The bus slowly pulled into the next designated stop. Red and blue lights flashed brightly through the large windows of the bus. 2 police cruisers blocked the path forward. 4 police officers stepped out of their vehicles. They were dressed in dark blue uniforms with heavy utility belts carrying radios and cuffs. They boarded the bus quickly, their hands resting cautiously on their belts. They surveyed the chaotic scene inside. They saw 4 known gang members groaning on the floor. They saw one calm man standing near his disciplined dog. The passengers immediately started talking all at once. They pointed fingers at the gang members and explained exactly what had happened. They praised Spencer for stepping in and saving them from being robbed. The police officers listened to the witnesses. They quickly handcuffed the 4 gang members and pulled them up to their feet. One of the police officers walked down the aisle toward Spencer. He was an older man with gray hair at his temples. He pulled out a small notepad. "We are going to need a statement from you, sir," the officer said politely. "Of course," Spencer replied. He answered the officer's questions with brief, factual sentences. He explained the physical contact was entirely in self-defense and the defense of the other passengers. He provided his basic identification but kept his military status quiet. He wanted to avoid any unnecessary complications with his chain of command. The officer wrote down the notes and nodded in appreciation. "You handled yourself well," the officer noted, glancing down at Sarge. "And you have a very well-trained companion." "He is a good dog," Spencer said simply. As the police dragged the gang leader off the bus, the tall man turned his head. Blood trickled slowly from his split lip. He glared at Spencer with pure, unfiltered hatred. He did not say a single word, but his dark eyes made a clear promise. This was not the end of the conflict. He would remember this humiliation. Spencer met the gang leader's gaze with the same cold, unbroken indifference. He did not care about the man's silent threats. He watched the police load the men into the back of the cruisers. Once the bus was clear, Spencer sat back down in his seat. He placed a gentle hand on Sarge's head. The large dog leaned against his leg, completely relaxed once again. The immediate job was done, and Spencer just wanted to get back to his hotel room. Spencer woke at 5 in the morning. Habit dictated his schedule, even on vacation. He rolled out of the comfortable hotel bed and dropped to the floor. He completed 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups in absolute silence. Sarge lay on the carpet nearby. The large German shepherd rested his head on his paws and watched his master with alert eyes. Morning light slowly crept through the gap in the curtains. The city of Chicago began to wake up outside their window. Traffic noise replaced the quiet hum of the night. Spencer stood up and walked to the bathroom. He took a cold shower to fully awaken his senses. He dressed in a clean pair of dark jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and his sturdy boots. He poured dry dog food into a plastic bowl for Sarge. The dog ate quickly and efficiently. Spencer turned on the small television resting on the wooden dresser. He intended to check the local weather forecast before planning his day. He wanted to visit the Navy Pier and perhaps take Sarge for a long walk along the lake. The screen flickered to life. A morning news program appeared. The news anchor was a young woman with neat blonde hair and a bright red blazer. She looked directly into the camera with an expression of intense excitement. Spencer stopped moving. He stared at the screen. The weather forecast was not on the television. His own face was on the television. The teenager from the bus had uploaded the video to the internet. The shaky footage played on the news broadcast. It showed Spencer catching the gang leader's heavy boot. It showed the rapid, precise strikes that dropped the 4 attackers to the floor. The camera zoomed in on Spencer's calm expression and Sarge's disciplined posture. The video had already gathered millions of views overnight. The anchor called him the silent guardian of Chicago and praised his bravery. She urged viewers to call a hotline if they recognized the mysterious hero. Spencer let out a slow, quiet breath. He picked up the television remote and turned the screen black. Society often desperately seeks a hero to admire, but people rarely understand the heavy burden that accompanies the title. Fame acts as a loud, bright beacon, drawing the eyes of everyone around. For a man trained to operate strictly in the shadows and avoid detection, public attention is not a reward. It is a severe tactical disadvantage. It is the ultimate enemy of a peaceful life. Spencer grabbed his dark gray sweater and pulled it over his head. He found a faded blue baseball cap in his bag and pulled the brim down low over his eyes. He packed his few belongings into his canvas duffel bag. He needed to change his location. The hotel clerk had seen him check in with a large German shepherd. It would only take a few hours before someone connected the dots and called the local news station. He attached the heavy leather leash to Sarge's collar. "We are moving out," Spencer said quietly. Sarge stood up instantly, ready for action. They walked down the carpeted hallway and took the stairs instead of the elevator. Spencer wanted to avoid small, confined spaces with other people. They reached the ground floor lobby. The hotel clerk, an older man with thick glasses, stood behind the front desk. He was looking down at his smartphone. He glanced up as Spencer walked quickly toward the glass exit doors. The clerk looked at Spencer, looked at Sarge, and then looked back down at his phone with wide eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but Spencer was already out the door. The cold morning air hit Spencer's face. The sidewalks were crowded with people rushing to work. Spencer kept his head down. He walked with a fast, determined stride. He avoided the main avenues and navigated through the narrow alleys behind the tall commercial buildings. He noticed people staring at Sarge. German shepherds were common, but Sarge possessed a distinct black and tan coat and a military posture that drew the eye. Spencer knew he could not hide the dog easily. They needed to find a quiet motel on the outskirts of the city, far away from the downtown news cameras. Miles away from the busy streets, the atmosphere was entirely different. Deep underground, beneath an abandoned warehouse district, sat a private nightclub called the Neon Vault. The club smelled of stale alcohol, expensive cigars, and damp concrete. The music was turned off. The main floor was empty and dark. Inside a soundproof VIP room at the back of the club, Marcus sat on a black leather sofa. Marcus was a heavily built man in his late 40s. He wore a perfectly tailored dark blue suit. His dark eyes were cold, sharp, and highly analytical. He held a crystal glass of expensive whiskey in his right hand. He was the undisputed boss of the local street gangs. He controlled the extortion rackets, the illegal gambling, and the territory expansion in the southern districts. The heavy wooden door to the VIP room opened. A thin man with nervous eyes and a dark leather jacket walked inside. His name was Leo. Leo was Marcus's primary lieutenant. He held a small silver tablet in his shaking hands. "Boss, you need to see this," Leo said. His voice trembled slightly. Marcus took a sip of his whiskey. He placed the glass on the glass table in front of him. "Show me." Leo handed the tablet over. He pressed the play button on the screen. The viral video from the bus began to play. Marcus watched the screen intently. He saw his 4 men, the enforcers he used to terrorize the local transit lines, get utterly dismantled by one single man. He saw the tall gang leader crying on the floor in pain. Marcus did not shout. He did not curse. His silence was far more terrifying than anger. He watched the video a second time. He focused on Spencer's movements. He recognized the efficiency. That was not a lucky civilian. That was a highly trained professional. "They arrested all 4 of them at the next stop," Leo explained quietly. "The news is calling this guy a hero. The whole city is laughing at us." Marcus set the tablet down on the table. His gang relied entirely on fear to maintain control over the neighborhoods. They used intimidation to force business owners to pay protection money. They used violence to force families out of their homes so the organization could buy the land cheaply. Fear was their most valuable currency. This viral video destroyed that fear. It showed the entire city that Marcus's men were weak and easily beaten. Weakness invited rebellion. Marcus could absolutely not afford a rebellion. "Who is he?" Marcus asked. His voice was smooth and deadly. "We do not know yet," Leo replied. "The internet is trying to identify him. He has a big dog, a German shepherd." Marcus picked up his crystal glass. He hurled it against the brick wall. The glass shattered into 100 sharp pieces. Amber liquid stained the dark bricks. Leo flinched and took a step back. "Find him," Marcus ordered. He stood up and straightened his tailored suit jacket. "Pull every camera feed from that bus route. Ask every informant on the street. I do not care what it costs. Find the man, find the dog. I want them brought to me. We are going to send a very loud message to this city." Spencer stayed in a small, nameless motel on the western edge of Chicago. The room was incredibly basic. It contained a small bed, a small television on a wooden desk, and a window overlooking an empty, cracked parking lot. It suited his needs perfectly. He spent 3 entire days maintaining a strict, low profile. He ordered all his food for delivery, and only took Sarge out for walks during the quietest hours of the early morning and late night. The viral video from the transit bus continued to circulate widely on local news networks and social media platforms, but the physical distance provided a necessary buffer. Spencer knew how to disappear. He had spent his entire military career operating unseen. On the 4th evening of their stay, a heavy, damp fog rolled into the city. The temperature dropped sharply, chilling the air. Spencer decided to take Sarge for a much longer walk. They both needed the exercise to burn off the built-up energy of hiding in a small room. He chose a large, heavily wooded park located 2 miles away from the motel. The park featured winding dirt paths and thick lines of tall pine trees. The distant city lights barely penetrated the dense canopy of branches. It was completely isolated and quiet. Predators rarely announce their arrival. They prefer to wait patiently in the shadows until their prey completely drops their guard. Spencer understood this fundamental rule of combat perfectly, but the peaceful surroundings offered a very convincing false sense of security. They walked for over 30 minutes without seeing another person. The only sounds were the loud crunch of dry leaves under Spencer's heavy boots and the soft, rhythmic panting of the German shepherd. Sarge walked exactly 3 steps ahead of Spencer. His pointed ears stood straight up, swiveling like radar dishes. He sniffed the damp, rich soil and marked the large oak trees. Spencer breathed in the cold, wet air deeply. He felt the tight muscles in his shoulders and back finally relax. The constant stress of the busy city began to fade away. Suddenly, Sarge stopped walking. The large dog planted his paws firmly on the dirt path. The thick fur on the back of his neck stood straight up. A low, threatening growl vibrated deep in his throat. He stared intensely into the thick line of bushes and trees to their immediate right. Spencer stopped immediately. He did not speak a single word. He dropped his right hand down and quickly unclipped the heavy metal clasp of Sarge's leather leash. In any unpredictable combat situation, a leash is a highly dangerous liability. It heavily restricts movement and reaction time. Spencer wanted his partner to have total freedom to defend himself. "Quiet," Spencer commanded softly. Sarge stopped growling instantly, but his muscular body remained entirely rigid. He was fully prepared to strike at a moment's notice. Spencer slowly scanned the dark woods. He looked for any unnatural movement. He listened carefully for the sound of breaking branches or heavy footsteps. He saw absolutely nothing. The thick white fog made it incredibly difficult to see anything past 30 yards. Then, a sharp, metallic popping sound echoed loudly through the silent trees. A bright red flare shot straight up into the night sky. It exploded with a blinding, unnatural light. The harsh red glow illuminated the thick fog, instantly turning the quiet park into a chaotic landscape of dark, moving shadows. "Move!" Spencer shouted. He turned quickly to his left, intending to use a large, thick oak tree for immediate cover. Before he could even take 3 steps, a second popping sound echoed, then a third. Small, cylindrical metal canisters bounced heavily onto the dirt path directly in front of him. Thick, gray smoke violently hissed from the metal canisters. It was not normal smoke. It was highly concentrated tear gas. The thick chemical cloud expanded instantly, covering the entire path. The cold wind pushed the heavy gas directly into Spencer's face. The physical effects were immediate and extremely brutal. His eyes burned fiercely, feeling like they were full of crushed glass. His lungs forcefully rejected the contaminated air. He doubled over, coughing uncontrollably. He squeezed his eyes shut tightly to try and stop the searing pain. Sarge barked furiously. The brave dog did not run away from the danger. The loyal German shepherd charged directly into the thick, gray cloud of gas, aiming aggressively for the unseen attackers hidden in the trees. Spencer heard the loud sounds of a violent, chaotic struggle. He heard men shouting in absolute panic. He heard Sarge's deep, aggressive snarls and the sound of heavy bodies hitting the dirt. "Sarge, fall back!" Spencer yelled loudly. His voice was hoarse and broken by the heavy coughing fits. He forced his burning eyes open, hot tears streaming rapidly down his face, blurring his vision completely. He saw dark, shadowy figures moving rapidly through the illuminated red fog. There were at least 6 of them. They wore dark, heavy tactical gear and military-grade gas masks. They had planned this specific ambush perfectly. They knew they absolutely could not defeat Spencer in a fair, hand-to-hand fight. They used professional riot control tactics to completely neutralize his massive physical advantage. One of the masked men rushed aggressively toward Spencer from the right side. The tall man held a heavy wooden baseball bat. Spencer relied entirely on his deep muscle memory and combat training. He could not see the attacker clearly, but he heard the heavy rushing footsteps. He quickly ducked under the wide swinging bat. He lunged forward with explosive speed, grabbing the attacker's waist tightly. He drove the man hard into the solid dirt. Spencer delivered 2 incredibly powerful strikes directly to the man's masked face, knocking him completely unconscious instantly. More frantic shouting came from the dark trees. It was not a chaotic fight anymore. It was a highly coordinated extraction. Sarge's furious, aggressive barking suddenly changed pitch. It turned into a sharp, terrifying yelp of extreme pain. The heartbreaking sound cut right through Spencer's chest like a physical blade. "Sarge!" Spencer roared loudly. He scrambled desperately to his feet. He completely ignored the burning pain in his eyes and lungs. He sprinted blindly into the thickest part of the toxic gas cloud. He reached out wildly with his bare hands, desperately searching the empty air for his missing partner. He heard a heavy, powerful vehicle engine roar to life on the hidden access road nearby. Tires spun rapidly on the wet asphalt, screeching loudly as the large vehicle accelerated quickly away into the night. The bright red flare in the sky slowly burned out completely. The blinding light faded away, leaving the quiet park in deep, absolute darkness once again. The cold wind picked up slightly, slowly pushing the toxic gray gas cloud away deeply into the surrounding trees. Spencer stood completely alone on the empty dirt path. He coughed heavily, wiping the stinging chemical tears from his face. His blurry vision slowly began to clear. He looked completely around the empty, dark trail. The masked men were entirely gone. The heavy escape vehicle was gone. He looked down at the dark ground. He saw the heavy leather leash lying completely uselessly in the dirt. Beside the broken leash, he saw a black, heavy-duty stun baton. The dangerous weapon crackled softly with leftover electrical energy. Sarge was absolutely gone. Spencer dropped slowly down to one knee. He reached out and picked up the stun baton. His large hands did not shake even slightly. His breathing slowly returned to a very steady, highly controlled rhythm. The burning chemical pain in his eyes faded, fully replaced by an incredibly cold, dangerous focus. The street gang had crossed a massive, invisible line. They had forcefully taken the absolute only family he had left in the world. The basic rules of engagement had entirely changed. He was no longer just a tired civilian on vacation attempting to avoid a fight. He was a highly trained Navy SEAL actively entering enemy territory, and he absolutely would not stop hunting until he tore their entire criminal organization completely apart. The toxic fog slowly dissipated into the dark woods. Spencer stood completely alone on the empty dirt path. He held the heavy-duty stun baton in his right hand. The only sound left in the park was his own steady breathing. He closed his eyes for exactly 5 seconds. He visualized Sarge. He visualized the heavy van speeding away. When he opened his eyes, the tired civilian on vacation was entirely gone. The active-duty Navy SEAL took full command of his mind and body. Most ordinary people shatter completely when they lose the one thing they love most in the world. They allow blind panic to dictate their every move. However, for a man forged in the absolute extreme fires of military warfare, panic simply does not exist. Deep grief instantly transforms into highly concentrated, lethal focus. Spencer turned on a small, high-powered tactical flashlight he carried on his keychain. He pointed the bright white beam at the muddy ground. He walked slowly toward the area where the masked men had launched their ambush. He analyzed the disturbed dirt. He saw heavy boot prints scattered around the bushes. He followed the crushed grass toward the hidden access road. He found deep, aggressive tire tracks in the wet mud. The tread pattern belonged to a heavy commercial van. The vehicle had accelerated extremely fast, leaving deep gouges in the earth. He swept the flashlight beam back and forth across the immediate area. He looked for any dropped items or clues. His sharp eyes caught a small reflection of light near a broken tree branch. He walked over and crouched down. He picked up a solid metal Zippo lighter. The silver casing was heavily scratched and dented. He rubbed his thumb over the surface. An old logo was engraved into the metal. It depicted a ship anchor wrapped in a thick chain. Below the anchor, faded black letters spelled out a name. The words read, "The Rusty Anchor." Spencer recognized the name. It was a well-known dive bar located deep in the Southside district of the city. He slipped the heavy lighter into his front pocket. He knew exactly where he needed to go. Spencer ran all the way back to his cheap motel room. He did not feel the cold night air. He did not feel fatigue in his legs. He reached his room and locked the door behind him. He did not pack his canvas duffel bag. He had absolutely no intention of running away anymore. He stripped off his casual clothes and opened his military gear bag. He dressed carefully for a tactical assault. He put on dark gray combat pants with reinforced knees. He pulled on a tight, black, long-sleeved thermal shirt. He laced up his heavy-duty combat boots, pulling the strings tight. He took a roll of black medical tape and wrapped his knuckles securely to protect his hands during heavy physical contact. He pulled out his standard-issue tactical combat knife. The blade was entirely black to prevent any light reflection. He secured the thick sheath to his heavy leather belt. He checked the battery life on the captured stun baton and hooked it to his left side. He looked around the small, quiet room. He saw Sarge's empty plastic water bowl resting on the carpet. A cold, dangerous shadow crossed his eyes. He turned off the room light and walked out the door. He moved with absolute purpose. The South Side district of Chicago was entirely different from the bright downtown tourist areas. The streetlights flickered poorly. The sidewalks were cracked and covered in trash. Spencer walked down the dark avenue. He kept to the shadows, avoiding the direct glow of passing car headlights. He finally found the rusty anchor sitting on a desolate corner. A flickering neon sign buzzed loudly above the dirty glass door. Loud, heavy rock music poured out onto the street. Spencer pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of cheap beer, stale tobacco, and sweat. The bar was dimly lit. A dozen hard-looking men sat on broken wooden stools. They drank in silence and watched a small television in the corner. Spencer walked directly to the bar counter. He ordered a simple glass of water from the tired bartender. He leaned against the sticky wooden counter and used the large mirror behind the bar to scan the entire room. He studied every single face. He looked for tattoos, specific clothing, or familiar postures. Finally, his eyes locked onto a back booth located near a dark hallway. 3 men sat around a sticky table, playing a game of cards. One of the men wore a ripped leather jacket. Spencer recognized the jacket immediately. It was one of the men from the transit bus. The man was named Benny. Benny was an incredibly thin, nervous-looking man with a large spiderweb tattoo covering his neck. He nervously chewed on a plastic straw while looking at his cards. Benny threw his cards down in intense frustration. He cursed loudly at his 2 friends and stood up. He patted his empty pockets, looking for a lighter. He shook his head and walked down the dark hallway toward the back exit door. He wanted to smoke a cigarette outside. Spencer waited exactly 10 seconds. He left his glass of water on the bar and followed Benny into the dark hallway. The heavy metal back door slammed shut. The back alley was pitch black and smelled terribly of rotting garbage. Benny stood near a dumpster. He placed a cheap cigarette between his lips and fumbled with a box of matches. Spencer opened the metal door silently. He stepped out into the cold alley. The heavy door clicked shut behind him. Benny heard the noise. He turned around, slowly. The match in his hand burned out. His eyes went completely wide in absolute terror. He instantly recognized the calm, dangerous man standing in the alley. The memory of the brutal beating on the bus rushed back into his mind. Benny panicked. He reached quickly into his leather jacket to grab a weapon. Spencer closed the distance in a fraction of a second. He did not give the thin man any time to react. He grabbed Benny forcefully by the throat with his left hand. He lifted Benny slightly off the ground and slammed his back incredibly hard against the cold brick wall. The impact knocked the air out of Benny's lungs. The unlit cigarette fell into the dirty puddles below. Spencer pinned the man completely. He used his right hand to pull the silver Zippo lighter out of his pocket. He held the lighter up directly in front of Benny's terrified face. "Your friends dropped this in the park tonight," Spencer said quietly. His voice was completely devoid of any emotion. It was ice cold. "You took my dog. You have exactly 10 seconds to tell me where he is. If you lie to me, you will not walk back inside that building." Benny gagged and grabbed Spencer's thick wrist. He tried to pull the hand away, but it was like trying to move a solid steel bar. He looked into Spencer's eyes and saw absolute death waiting for him. "Okay," Benny choked out quickly. "Okay. I will tell you. Please do not hurt me." Spencer loosened his grip just enough to let the man speak clearly. "It was Marcus," Benny confessed rapidly, sweat pouring down his face. "He ordered the hit. He was furious about the video. He wanted to break you. They took the dog to the old ironworks factory down by the shipping docks. It is his main hideout. They have guards everywhere." "Thank you," Spencer said softly. He released his grip entirely. Benny collapsed completely onto the wet pavement. He coughed violently, holding his bruised throat. He did not dare to look up. He stayed on the ground, shaking in fear. Spencer did not look back. He turned around and walked briskly down the dark alley, heading straight toward the industrial shipping docks. The time for waiting was over. The industrial shipping docks sat on the absolute edge of the city. The area smelled heavily of salt water, decaying fish, and wet rust. Huge metal shipping containers formed massive metal walls along the cracked concrete. Spencer moved silently through the deep shadows of the stacked containers. He kept his breathing slow and completely controlled. He saw the old ironworks factory looming in the near distance. It was a massive, decaying structure made of corrugated steel and broken glass windows. A high chain-link fence, topped with rusted barbed wire, surrounded the entire property. Abandoned structures do not possess the peaceful silence of nature. They hold a heavy, expectant quiet, like a massive machine holding its breath and waiting to be violently turned back on. Spencer felt that heavy silence as he approached the perimeter. He knelt behind a stack of wooden pallets and analyzed the security layout. Two men stood near the main heavy iron gate. The first guard was a tall man with a thick red beard and a heavy leather coat. He held a long metal pipe in his right hand. The second guard was a heavy-set man wearing a faded gray beanie. He leaned against the metal fence, smoking a cigarette and staring mindlessly at his phone screen. They were completely relaxed. They believed their sheer numbers inside the factory provided absolute safety. They were entirely wrong. Spencer did not use the main gate. He moved silently along the dark fence line until he found a section where the concrete foundation had severely cracked and sunk into the mud. He slid under the sharp fence wire with mere inches to spare. He entered the factory grounds completely undetected. He stalked forward, using the scattered piles of scrap metal for cover. He needed to eliminate the outside guards to secure his eventual escape route. He approached the guard with the gray beanie from behind. Spencer moved with liquid grace, his heavy boots making absolutely zero sound on the damp concrete. He reached the man, grabbed his shoulder tightly, and delivered a precise strike to the side of his neck. The guard dropped his phone and collapsed instantly. Spencer caught the falling body before it hit the ground. He dragged the unconscious man into the shadows of a nearby dumpster. The tall guard with the red beard heard a slight scuffling noise. He turned around, holding his metal pipe up. "Hey!" the tall guard called out into the darkness. "Did you drop your phone again?" Spencer stepped smoothly out of the shadows. The tall guard swung the heavy metal pipe aggressively. Spencer ducked under the wide, clumsy swing. He drove his fist hard into the man's ribs, followed immediately by a sharp palm strike to the chin. The tall guard's eyes rolled back, and he slumped heavily against the iron gate. Spencer caught him and dragged him over to join his partner behind the dumpster. The outside perimeter was completely clear. Spencer located a rusted side door. The lock was old and brittle. He used his tactical knife to slowly pry the metal latch open. The door groaned slightly, but the loud sound of the crashing waves from the nearby docks masked the noise. He stepped inside the massive factory. The interior was incredibly dark and cavernous. Dust particles danced in the pale moonlight that filtered through the broken roof panels. Massive steel beams and old, rusted machinery created a confusing maze. Spencer navigated the factory floor slowly. He relied entirely on his hearing. He listened past the dripping water and the creaking metal. Then he heard it. A deep, continuous growl echoed from the upper level of the factory. It was Sarge. The sound filled Spencer with a massive surge of relief, instantly followed by a cold, deadly anger. His dog was alive, and he was clearly ready to fight. Spencer located a metal staircase leading up to a suspended catwalk. He climbed the stairs silently, placing his feet on the very edges of the metal grates to avoid making any squeaking sounds. He reached the second floor. A long hallway of old administrative offices stretched out before him. The growling came from the last door on the left. It was a heavy steel door locked with a thick padlock. Spencer moved toward the door, but he suddenly stopped. He heard a voice coming from the adjacent office on the right. The door was slightly open, and a weak yellow light spilled out into the dark hallway. Spencer recognized the voice instantly. It was Marcus, the wealthy gang boss Benny had described. Spencer pressed his back flat against the cold wall. He edged closer to the open door and listened carefully. "I completely understand the timeline," Marcus said loudly. He was clearly speaking to someone on a mobile phone. "You do not need to worry about the South District. The incident on the transit bus was heavily staged. My men were just doing their job. We are creating an environment of fear. When the residents feel unsafe, they sell their houses for cheap. The entire neighborhood will be empty in 2 months." Marcus paused, listening to the person on the other end of the line. "The land will be yours, just like we agreed," Marcus continued, his voice dripping with arrogant confidence. "You get your massive commercial real estate project, and my organization gets a clean cut of the profits. You just make sure the police department continues to look the other way." Spencer's eyes narrowed. The random harassment on the bus was not random at all. It was a highly calculated campaign of urban terror designed to drive innocent people out of their homes. Marcus was not just a street thug. He was working directly with someone incredibly powerful, someone who could control the local police force. Spencer knew he needed to leave and bring this information to the federal authorities, but he absolutely would not leave without his partner. He pushed away from the wall and stepped toward the heavy steel door holding Sarge. He gripped his heavy-duty stun baton, preparing to smash the thick padlock. He shifted his weight onto his right foot. A loud, sharp crunch echoed violently through the silent hallway. Spencer looked down. In the absolute darkness, he had completely missed a large piece of shattered industrial glass lying on the concrete floor. His heavy combat boot had crushed it. The sound was deafening in the quiet space. The talking in the adjacent office stopped instantly. "Who is out there?" Marcus yelled loudly. Spencer did not freeze. He raised the stun baton and brought it down forcefully on the padlock. The heavy lock shattered, falling to the floor. Before Spencer could even pull the heavy steel door open, the entire factory completely transformed. A piercing, high-pitched alarm siren suddenly blared from the walls. Dozens of high-intensity halogen floodlights snapped on all at once. The blinding white light illuminated every single corner of the massive factory floor below. Spencer looked over the metal railing of the catwalk. The factory was not empty. Shadows moved rapidly across the ground floor. At least 30 armed gang members rushed out from behind the rusted machinery and shipping crates. They carried baseball bats, heavy chains, and steel pipes. They completely flooded the ground floor, shouting aggressively and pointing up at the catwalk. They moved quickly, securing all the exit doors. Spencer stood at the top of the stairs, completely illuminated by the harsh lights. He was entirely surrounded, vastly outnumbered, and trapped deep inside enemy territory. He dropped the broken padlock, gripped his stun baton tightly, and prepared for absolute war. The blinding halogen lights eliminated all the shadows on the ground floor. Spencer stood at the top of the metal staircase. He looked down at the vast sea of armed gang members. They shouted angry threats and hit their metal pipes against the rusted machinery. They expected the lone intruder to surrender quickly. They were entirely wrong. Spencer did not hesitate. He raised his heavy boot and kicked the broken padlock across the metal grate. Then he grabbed the heavy steel handle of the security door. He pulled it open with one massive tug. Sarge exploded out of the dark room like a guided missile. The large German Shepherd did not pause to adjust to the bright lights. He identified the immediate threats below and let out a deafening, aggressive roar. Spencer felt a massive surge of energy in his chest. His partner was back. The odds had just shifted significantly. Fear is a highly contagious disease, but so is absolute confidence. When a single man and his dog stand against 30 armed men and do not flinch, the larger group instantly begins to doubt their own advantage. The gang members at the bottom of the stairs stopped hitting their pipes. They took a collective half-step backward. "Move," Spencer commanded. They did not walk down the stairs. They attacked the stairs. Sarge took the lead, leaping over the sharp metal steps. He crashed directly into the first line of gang members. He clamped his powerful jaws around the thick wrist of a man holding a baseball bat. The man screamed loudly and dropped the weapon. Sarge used his massive weight to pull the man down, tripping two others directly behind him. Spencer followed a second later. He bypassed the stairs entirely. He vaulted over the metal railing of the catwalk and dropped 15 feet directly to the ground floor. He landed perfectly, rolling his strong shoulders to absorb the heavy impact. He popped up instantly in the center of the chaotic mob. He swung the crackling stun baton in a wide, sweeping arc. The electric blue sparks hit the closest attacker, sending thousands of volts into his chest. The man convulsed fiercely and collapsed instantly to the concrete floor. The factory floor turned into an absolute war zone. The gang members tried to surround Spencer, but the tight spaces between the old iron machinery made it impossible for them to attack all at once. Spencer used the restricted environment to his complete advantage. He grabbed a heavy metal chain hanging from the ceiling and swung it hard into the faces of 3 charging men. He ducked under a wild pipe swing, stepped firmly on the attacker's knee to break his balance, and delivered a crushing elbow strike to his jaw. Sarge operated with perfect military discipline. He did not bite to kill. He bit to disarm and immobilize. Whenever an attacker tried to sneak up behind Spencer, the brave German Shepherd intercepted them aggressively. The dog became a terrifying black and tan blur of fur and teeth. Spencer moved with lethal precision. He did not waste a single movement. He blocked, countered, and struck with devastating force. He took several heavy hits to his shoulders and back, but his adrenaline masked the pain entirely. Within 5 minutes, the massive numerical advantage completely vanished. Over 20 men lay unconscious or groaning weakly on the hard concrete floor. The remaining few dropped their weapons in absolute terror and ran toward the back exits. Spencer stood breathing heavily in the center of the carnage. He wiped a small trail of blood from his split lip. Sarge stood right beside him, panting steadily but completely unharmed. A sudden loud crash echoed from the second-floor catwalk. Marcus, the wealthy gang boss, had attempted to escape through the back administrative offices. He kicked a locked wooden door repeatedly, trying to force it open. "Fetch," Spencer said softly. Sarge bounded up the metal stairs with incredible speed. Marcus turned around just in time to see the massive dog launch into the empty air. Sarge hit Marcus square in the chest. Both of them crashed hard onto the metal grating. Sarge pinned the gang boss completely, hovering his sharp teeth just inches from Marcus's terrified face. A low, continuous growl vibrated deeply from the dog's throat. Spencer walked slowly up the stairs. He reached the catwalk and looked down at the helpless criminal. He picked Marcus up forcefully by his expensive suit jacket and slammed his back against the metal railing. "Tell me about the transit bus," Spencer demanded. His voice cut through the cold air like a physical blade. Marcus held his hands up defensively. He looked at the dangerous teeth of the German Shepherd, and then at the cold eyes of the Navy SEAL. He surrendered his pride instantly. "It was a setup," Marcus confessed quickly, gasping for breath. "We staged the entire thing. We harassed the passengers to create panic. We wanted the neighborhood to feel completely unsafe, so the property values would drop rapidly." "Why?" Spencer asked, tightening his iron grip on the suit jacket. "Real estate?" Marcus choked out desperately. "We buy the cheap land and sell it to a major commercial developer. We make millions." The police look the other way because the man funding the operation pays them off. He completely controls the entire district. Before Spencer could ask for a specific name, the heavy iron loading doors at the front of the factory began to slide open with a loud, grinding noise. A sleek, black luxury SUV drove slowly onto the illuminated factory floor. The vehicle stopped exactly in the middle of the defeated gang members. The driver stepped out first. He was a heavily armed bodyguard wearing black tactical gear. He opened the back door of the SUV. A tall man stepped out into the bright halogen light. He wore an expensive gray trench coat over a perfectly tailored dark suit. He had neat silver hair and cold, calculating blue eyes. This was Councilman Thomas Vance. He was a prominent local politician known entirely across the city for his strict policies on crime and public safety. Spencer recognized him immediately from the morning news broadcasts playing in his hotel room just days ago. The man promising on television to clean up the streets of Chicago was the exact same man secretly funding the criminals. Councilman Vance looked around the destroyed factory. He looked at the groaning men on the floor. Then, he looked up at the catwalk and locked eyes with Spencer. The corrupt politician did not look angry. He simply looked terribly annoyed. He reached slowly into his gray trench coat and pulled out a suppressed handgun. The ultimate mastermind had arrived to clean up the messy situation himself. Councilman Thomas Vance stood confidently under the harsh halogen lights of the factory floor. He held the suppressed handgun with an incredibly steady grip. He did not look like a friendly politician making a passionate campaign speech. He looked like a cold, calculating executioner. His personal bodyguard stepped forward to join him. The bodyguard was a heavily built man with extremely short military cropped hair and dead, emotionless eyes. He wore thick, black tactical armor over a dark uniform and carried a heavy automatic rifle. Marcus, still pinned tightly against the metal railing of the upper catwalk by Spencer, let out a pathetic, desperate cry. "Thomas, help me!" Marcus yelled loudly. "This guy is crazy. We can fix this situation right now." Vance did not lower his weapon. He aimed the handgun directly up at the dark catwalk. Men who build their entire empires on deep corruption often share a very fatal flaw in their thinking. They truly believe their expensive suits, thick bank accounts, and political titles make them invincible. They completely forget that true violence does not respect a man's wealth or his public status in society. "You are a massive disappointment to me, Marcus," Vance said. His voice was incredibly calm and smooth, echoing slightly in the large, empty industrial space. "You could not even handle a simple transit bus operation without creating a viral internet sensation. Now you have brought a feral dog and an angry vigilante directly to my front door." "I protected the entire operation," Marcus pleaded desperately. "You compromised absolutely everything," Vance replied sharply. He turned his head slightly toward his armored bodyguard. "Kill the dog first, then kill the vigilante. When you are completely done with them, shoot Marcus. We will burn this entire factory to the ground tonight and tell the media it was a tragic gang violence incident." The bodyguard raised his automatic rifle immediately. He aimed the heavy barrel up at the metal catwalk. Spencer did not wait for the lethal bullets to fly. He pushed Marcus violently over the metal railing. The wealthy gang boss screamed in absolute terror as he fell 15 feet through the air. He crashed hard onto the solid concrete floor below and rolled away in immense pain. The sudden distraction of a falling body caused the heavily armed bodyguard to hesitate for exactly 1 second. That single second was all Spencer needed to initiate his counterattack. "Sarge, break right!" Spencer shouted loudly. The trained German shepherd obeyed the command instantly. Sarge leaped aggressively off the metal stairs and sprinted toward the right side of the factory floor. He wove rapidly between the rusted industrial machines and wooden crates. The bodyguard tracked the fast-moving animal with his rifle, firing a short, loud burst of bullets. The sharp cracks echoed violently in the large space. Bright yellow sparks flew rapidly from a metal shipping container as the deadly bullets narrowly missed the dog. Sarge barked loudly and fiercely, drawing the guard's total attention. The dog was far too fast, and the deep shadows between the heavy machines provided excellent cover. While the armored bodyguard focused entirely on shooting Sarge, Spencer moved silently to the left side. He dropped quickly from the catwalk and used the thick steel support beams for physical cover. He moved completely like a ghost in the dark. He flanked the dangerous bodyguard, closing the distance rapidly from the man's blind side. The bodyguard suddenly realized he had lost visual sight of his primary target. He turned around quickly to secure his perimeter. Spencer lunged forward out from behind a large iron pillar. He grabbed the hot barrel of the automatic rifle with his bare hands and pushed it violently toward the ceiling. The gun fired wildly into the fragile roof panels, shattering glass overhead. Spencer stepped quickly inside the guard's defensive perimeter. He delivered a crushing, powerful knee strike directly to the man's stomach. The heavy tactical armor absorbed some of the heavy impact, but the sheer physical force knocked the air completely out of the guard's lungs. Spencer followed immediately with a lightning-fast elbow strike to the side of the guard's helmet. The heavy impact disoriented the large man completely. Spencer twisted the heavy rifle directly out of the guard's hands and struck him incredibly hard in the chest with the solid stock of the weapon. The bodyguard collapsed backward onto the cold concrete floor, completely unconscious before his head even hit the ground. Councilman Vance saw his expensive security fail completely. True panic finally cracked his calm, polished political mask. He aimed his suppressed handgun at Spencer and pulled the trigger twice in rapid succession. Spencer dove quickly behind a thick wooden shipping crate. Sharp splinters of wood exploded into the air as the deadly bullets hit the strong crate. Spencer took a deep, controlled breath. He pulled his personal smartphone out of his front pocket. He pressed the record button on the standard voice memo application. "You are completely trapped, Councilman," Spencer called out loudly from behind the wooden crate. "Your men are defeated. Marcus already told me absolutely everything about the illegal real estate scheme. He told me exactly about the transit bus harassment. Marcus is just a dead street thug," Vance yelled back defensively. He took a slow, nervous step backward toward his luxury black SUV. "Nobody in this city will ever believe the word of a dead criminal over a highly respected city councilman. I completely own the local police department. I own the local judges. You are nothing but a nameless vagrant trespassing on private property tonight. I can shoot you right now, and the corrupt police will give me a public medal for heroic self-defense." "So you completely admit you funded the gang to terrorize the neighborhood?" Spencer asked loudly, ensuring his voice carried over to the phone microphone. "Of course I did," Vance shouted aggressively, his extreme anger blinding his logical judgment entirely. "The poor people living in that district are completely worthless. They do not deserve that prime real estate. I am bringing a massive commercial center to this beautiful city. I am bringing millions of dollars in tax revenue. A few broken windows and some scared civilians are a very small price to pay for economic progress." Spencer looked closely at the recording screen on his smartphone. The green audio levels had bounced wildly during the entire exchange. He had successfully captured a crystal-clear, completely undeniable confession. He stopped the audio recording and slipped the phone safely back into his secure pocket. "Your progress is over," Spencer said calmly. He stepped confidently out from behind the damaged wooden crate. Vance raised his handgun again in sheer panic. Before the corrupt politician could even pull the trigger, a massive black and tan blur leaped high onto the hood of the luxury SUV. Sarge launched his muscular body off the expensive vehicle and crashed directly into Vance's chest. The powerful politician screamed in sheer terror as the heavy working dog took him violently to the ground. The handgun skittered harmlessly across the concrete floor. Sarge pinned Vance aggressively to the ground, barking loudly and fiercely directly into the man's terrified face. Vance squeezed his eyes shut tightly and begged loudly for his life. Spencer walked over slowly and picked up the dropped handgun. He expertly unloaded the weapon and tossed the empty metal frame aside. He looked down at the terrified, pathetic politician on the ground. Suddenly, the loud sound of heavy emergency sirens filled the air outside the factory walls. Bright red and blue flashing lights illuminated the broken windows. Spencer had used a highly secure military satellite phone line to contact a trusted federal contact in the FBI just before he breached the factory gate. He knew the local police were entirely corrupt, so he brought in the absolute highest level of federal authorities. The heavy iron doors at the front of the factory burst open violently. Dozens of heavily armed FBI tactical agents swarmed quickly into the large building. They shouted strict orders and secured the entire area rapidly. They handcuffed the groaning gang members on the floor. They pulled Councilman Vance up roughly from the ground and placed him in heavy steel cuffs. The federal agents completely ignored Vance's desperate political threats and dragged him away toward the armored transport vehicles waiting outside. A senior FBI agent wearing a dark suit walked up to Spencer. He looked at the massive German Shepherd and the completely defeated criminals scattered across the factory floor. He nodded silently in deep respect. Spencer handed the senior agent his smartphone containing the recorded audio confession. The sun began to rise beautifully over the great city of Chicago. The morning sky slowly turned a brilliant shade of orange and bright pink. The cold morning air felt incredibly clean and refreshing. Spencer walked out of the massive factory gates. Sarge walked proudly right beside his left leg. The active-duty Navy SEAL had successfully completed his hardest personal mission yet. He took a deep breath, smiled slightly at his loyal dog, and walked toward the quiet city streets to finally enjoy the rest of his peaceful vacation. This story reminds us that true strength is not found in intimidation or power over the weak, but in the absolute courage to protect the innocent. Spencer and his loyal German Shepherd, Sarge, show us that even in the darkest corners of a corrupted city, true justice can still prevail. Sometimes, the quietest individuals carry the greatest strength, stepping forward to shield others when the system entirely fails. Their incredible journey proves that unwavering loyalty and bravery can overcome any evil standing in the way. May God bless you and your loved ones with enduring peace and safety. May He protect all the silent heroes and faithful animal companions who bravely stand by our side in times of trouble. If you truly believe in the power of righteous justice and the unbreakable bond between a man and his dog, please type Amen in the comments below. If this story inspired you today, please share this video with your friends and family to spread the powerful message. We would love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting and thrilling stories. Thank you so much for watching.